friends, it's Rana and it's finally time for me to make this list. I have been wanting to do this for so long, but I'm always hesitant because I keep thinking to myself that maybe I'm gonna read another great series that will change all of this list. But whatever, if I did read a great fantasy series that will change my list, not a problem at all. I will make this list or update it once every year or 2 years or so. But for the time being, I'm gonna tell you my top 10 favorite fantasy series of all time, ranked from my least favorite at number 10 to my favorite one at number 1. Bear in mind that I love all of these, and some days I love some more than the other, so they are kinda interchangeable. And also, I didn't include any manga or graphic novels because I just wanted to have pure fantasy books. Now let's start with the list, and at number 10 we have the Caius Walking trilogy by Patrick Ness. This is one of my earliest introduction to fantasy series, and the first book we have The Knife of Never Letting Go. The second is The Ask and the Answer, and the third Monsters of Men. So this series is a fantasy sci-fi one, and it follows Ted Hewitt. He is a little boy living in a faraway planet where all the inhabitants of that planet are men, because years ago a germ that infected this planet killed all the women and made the men hear each other's thoughts. Todd starts suspecting things in his village on this planet, and some secrets get revealed, and he becomes a runaway, and people of this town start chasing him. And on his runaway journey, he stumbles upon a silent creature, a creature that he can't read the thoughts of. This series is one of the first creative series I read, and I loved how they portrayed the way he heard other people's thoughts and how loud they were. As you can see, the books in this series are not short, but they read so quickly. They are fun, intriguing, and the premise is so good. But it is a great series. I like it a lot, but it is not the best one out of this list. That's why it is on number 10, and it would be probably the first series to be knocked out of this list if I read something better. This series, in the first book, The Knife of Never Letting Go, there is a point in that book, everyone who read that book knows what I'm talking about. Everybody cried their eyes out when they read it, and I wasn't different than these people because I actually full on cried reading this scene. It is a really good series, and I think it is a good starting point for people who want to get into fantasy series. I feel like it is more on the young adult side of fantasy books rather than adult fantasy. It has some dark themes in it, but because of the age of the characters, it reads more of YA. At the 9th spot, we have Penryn and the End of Days by Suzanne E. This trilogy is a YA urban dystopian fantasy series where angels are bad and Caius fills the earth when they descend. We follow 17 years old Penryn and her little sister trying to survive. We also see her crazy mother. This trilogy is my guilty pleasure. I love this series, especially as the first book. It is so funny, so dark, so twisted, but I enjoyed it so much, and I laughed so many times reading the first book. It was unexpected when I first read it. It is so action-packed, full of enemies to lovers kind of trope. I'm not a romance girly, but I really enjoyed this book. And my favorite character is the mother. It's been a while since I read this series, and I really need to reread it sometime soon because I enjoyed it so much. I know not many people consider it one of the greatest fantasy series ever, but it is a really enjoyable one. The next series we have on the 8th spot is the Wayward Children series by Shannon McGuire. It is a middle grade / YA portal fantasy series. Not all of the books I have on my list are YA books, but as we go up in the list, we get to the epic adult ones. So this series, it starts with The Every Heart a Doorway, and it talks about this school or this house that managed by this lady who takes in children who her parents think that they are troubled or they went missing and came back different than before, but they are actually children who traveled to other worlds by these doors that suddenly appear to some of them out of nowhere and take them to other worlds. Some people manage to go to worlds that fits them so well, and when they get back to our world they get devastated. Other got traumatized experience in these other worlds, and this house takes care of these children when their parents think that they are just troubled teens or children. It is my first time reading a series since the first book got released, and I kept waiting for each release each year. I never did that before this series, and this one's my first doing this. I never waited a year or two for the next release in a series, but when I started doing this with the Wayward Children series, it felt so fun. The last release, the last installment of the series, I really didn't like it. I hated it, but my favorites in the series are in this order: Every Heart a Doorway, In an Absent Dream, and Lost in the Moment and Found. I will keep reading these books as long as Shannon McGuire releases them. They are quick reads, you can finish it in one sitting, and it is so fun and enjoyable. Some books in this series go into dark subject matters, but overall it is so fun to read. Now for the 7th spot we have Harry Potter by J.K. Rowling. I know some of you will get angry at me for just mentioning the series, but oh well. I just mentioned previously that I never followed a series with each new release. I never been a Harry Potter child. Most of you experienced that with each new release of the books and the movies, but I wasn't one of you all. I was too late to the game. I watched the movies, all the movies, for the first time in high school. I didn't understand half of the shit that were going down in the movies, but I was there for the vibes. Then I read the series for the first time in uni, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. I reread it again after that. I enjoyed this series the second time I read it. I know it is full of plot holes, but the world and the magic is so fun. You can't deny how important this series had a role in the fantasy world. The funny thing is, I really don't like Harry himself. He's one of my least favorite characters. I just like the world, the vibe, the magic of this series. And I'm really in an urgent need for a reread because it's been a while and I want to dive again in this world. Now for number 6, we actually have a duology, and it is Villains by V. Schwab. The first book is Vicious and the second book is Vengeful, but we don't talk about her in this household. It is an urban fantasy, paranormal YA series. It is full of morally gray characters. No, they are full-on villains. I love it. I love it so much. It has a lot of many things that I love in books. Found family, bad characters that you sympathize with them for some reason or another. I really adored this book when I first read it. I liked the plot twist, the reveals, everything was so top tier. But why is it not higher on this list if I loved it so much? Is because of the second book, Vengeful. That book was so damn bad, it brings down the series overall for me. If it was as good as the first book, it would have been amazing, but the second book was garbage. This book, though, it is an ultimate favorite of mine. But I'm so disappointed in V. Schwab for ruining this duology by writing that heinous second book. The characters we followed and loved in this first book, they are barely have any parts in the second one. In the second one, we have new characters that are annoying. I would rather read about the characters from the first book living their own life, reading about them cooking or doing some random shit than reading about the new characters. Oh, I never even told you what this book is about. Harry Potter, you don't have to. Everyone knows what Harry Potter is about, but Vicious, it follows two university students who starts a research paper, and they do some experiments to study something called the extraordinaries, the EOs, and they start making experiments on themselves, and it turned horribly wrong. And it is like, I think 10 years later, one of them is out of jail and is seeking to kill the other. Now for the 5th spot, we have The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. Do I need to talk more about this? Everyone knows what the Hunger Games. I don't need to explain it. I didn't explain Harry Potter because you know, and I won't explain the Hunger Games, but I'm gonna tell you my journey with it. So when this movie came out in the cinemas, we used, my mom, my sister, and I, to go to the cinemas like every weekend or two to watch a random movie. And we saw people going into this movie, and it seemed like an action-packed movies, and we love action movies, so we went into it. And we had zero idea what was it about. We had zero idea that it was a book to movie adaptation, because we just went in to see what is it about, and I never would have dreamed in my life that it will be my new favorite movie. I was so invested watching it that I didn't feel the time going by, and I rewatched that first movie at least 4 times to 5 times in my life, and reread this first book at least 2 times. I never do that. I never rewatch movies. I never reread books. Only a handful of movies I rewatched and a handful of books I reread. And it speaks volumes of how much this first book is amazing. It even started the whole dystopian craze that went for a few years in the 2010s. Katniss is one, if not my favorite, baddest female character ever. And this book got me so emotional on so many occasions. Yes, the rest of the series is amazing, but this book is the best. It is crazy good, never gets old. It was good 10 years ago and it is still good in 2024. Now for the fourth spot, we will start now getting into the adult fantasy series. We have these Stormlight Archives by Brandon Sanderson. Don't gasp, hear me out, let me defend myself. The reason why it is not up on this list or not higher on this list is because it is still unfinished, first of all. Second of all, I enjoyed the first book, The Way of Kings, so much. It was a very good book. The second book, Words of Radiance, phenomenal, amazing, show-stopping. However, the third book, Oathbringer, it went downhill for me. I really didn't enjoy Oathbringer. It was like 3 stars from me. Yes, I know, a crime to the humanity to give a Brandon Sanderson book 3 stars, but I really didn't enjoy Oathbringer. It's been over a year since I read it, and I still can't get myself to read the 4th book, Rhythm of War, before the release of the 5th book, is because I really am afraid that I'm not gonna enjoy it like I didn't enjoy the Oathbringer one. It is an epic long series that's gonna be like 10 installments, but each 5 books in it will be separate arc of itself, and the first arc will finish soon this year with the release of the 5th book. But I love the characters, I love the world. However, except for Dalinar, I hate his guts. I really hope that he dies. I don't enjoy him. I don't enjoy reading from his point of view. I just want him to disappear and let the other characters shine. There are so many dull and boring moments in the series. Yes, it is amazing, but the boring parts are so boring, and let's be honest, some things I don't really understand. I go and Google them to understand everything. It will remain on the 4th spot till it is finished. Hopefully that it will be higher on this list when I finish it, but I don't know yet if it will be or not. If Brandon doesn't mess up the 5th book, or if I don't enjoy the 4th book, it will be a problem. So take it with a grain of salt that I might change my opinion of this series when I finish it. Now we are down for the top fantasy series of all time, and the 3rd spot we have the Devabad trilogy by S.A. Chakraborty. Look at these gorgeous covers. There are so many reasons why I love the series, but when I bought it, I knew that it talked about Jinn, but I didn't know the extent of it. So when I first started the first book, City of Brass, and it started with the main character Nahri in Old Egypt, and it talked about many things, familiar things in the culture, in the language, Arabic language, I was mesmerized. I wasn't expecting for the series to be this inspired by the Middle East, the Arab world, the Islamic world, and it was such a fun surprise at the start, and I was so over the moon when I started reading it and I found out about that. So it talks about Nahri that lives in Egypt, and she accidentally, we're gonna not spoil how, she summons a jinn warrior that sweeps her to this jinn land called Davibat. I know that this series suffers from pacing issues, but overall I didn't mind it and I found it to be exceptional series. The first and third books are amazing. The second book somehow suffers from this middle book syndrome. I finished this trilogy last year and my feelings toward it still fresh. I still remember how I loved it. I loved the characters and the ending. I really appreciate the author because she is not Arab. She is not born Muslim. She became Muslim later in her life, but she did a whole lot of research to do this book, and it shows, because not any non-Arab person will know all of these things about mythology and whatnot, but she did a phenomenal job with writing this trilogy. I loved it so much that I went ahead and recently bought this The River of Silver. I believe it is like short stories from this world by the characters we loved and enjoyed and connected with, because I really want to dive back into this world. I don't usually buy novellas or short story collections for fantasy series, but I did with this one. Now, for the second place, we have the Mistborn trilogy, first era. I didn't read the second era and I'm not planning to. This was my first experience with high epic fantasy with complicated magic system, and I enjoyed it. It talks about this world where the evil Lord Ruler takes over the world and is not defeated, and a bunch of con artists are planning to take him down. It is so perfect. A masterpiece in my opinion, and in my opinion I found it to be better than the Stormlight Archives. Yes, I know, controversial opinion, but it is way better than the Stormlight Archives. I don't care what you say. Yes, it suffers a little bit with the middle book syndrome, but overall it is amazing. And that ending, never done before, unexpected. I can't imagine anyone seeing that ending coming. Greatest finale ever to any fantasy trilogy in the whole entire history of fantasy books. And I actually prefer the magic system in the Mistborn trilogy rather than the Stormlight Archives. We get to know more about the magic system, we understand it better, and it is logical more than the one in the Stormlight Archives that sometimes I get lost understanding it. It also doesn't have that many parts that are boring or unenjoyable like in the Stormlight Archives. Yes, I didn't like the political war between houses in the Mistborn, but I enjoyed the trilogy more than the Stormlight Archives. And you know that I'm a sucker for the found family trope. Many of these series mentioned today have it, and this one has a really top-notch family trope trait in it. Now, last but definitely not least, my number one favorite fantasy series of all time is the Gentleman Bastard series by Scott Lynch. I know, I never seen anyone else on BookTube places this series as their number one favorite series of all time, but I did, and let me tell you why. Gentleman Bastard series mainly talks about this Venice-inspired world with a bunch of con artists slash thieves with the leadership of Locke Lamora. And they, at the first book at least, they're gonna attempt a heist. I am more of a plot person. I never get attached to characters. It is very rare for me to get attached to characters, but I get attached to a lot of characters in the series, especially Locke Lamora. He is the love of my life in the fiction world, in the fantasy world. I adore him. I fell head over heels for this series, especially the first book. It is my favorite fantasy book of all time. Nothing will top it. I believe that nothing will top that book. The second book was also great, not as good as the first one, but still great. The third book suffered a little bit. It has phenomenal plot, amazing characters, great family trope portrayed in a way that will never get portrayed ever in any other book. And I loved the risks that the author Scott Lynch took with the books. Like, other authors are afraid to kill their characters, and if they did kill a character, it is either a side character or a character that they will eventually bring back to life, some way or another. Like, you wanna kill the character, kill the damn character, you don't have to bring them back to life. It is a fantasy book with high risks, but we don't see the high risks. People still remain alive at the end of fantasy series. How? I don't understand. This series is supposed to be a 7-book series. We still only on the 3rd book. The first book got published in 2006. The second book, I believe, in 2007. And the 3rd book was published 10 years ago. Yes, it was published 10 years ago. We were promised the 4th book like 8 years ago, and each year it keeps getting pushed back. The release date keep getting pushed back till the point that we don't even have a release date anymore. That's because of many reasons. The author went through divorce, health issues, trouble with writing the book, for many reasons that I might discuss later, but not today. There's a chance that this series that it will never get completed? Yes, maybe. Will it still hold a special place in my heart? Yes. I will never change anything about the series. I love it. It is so perfect. Even if I didn't like things in the 3rd book, I just still love it. I have this series on my reread list for this year. I'm planning to reread it, especially the 1st book. It is no problem if I didn't get to the 2nd and 3rd this year, but the 1st one I really want to read this year. I want to get back to this world. I want to experience what I experienced when I first read the 1st book, to fall in love with the characters and the plot again, to encourage me to be a little bit more patient waiting for the 4th book. So that's it for my top 10 fantasy series of all time. Please tell me your top 10 or at least your top 3 fantasy series in the comment section, because I love to discover new fantasy series. I'm hoping that I will do this list to update it at least once a year or once every 2 years when things change and new series are on this list. But hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time. Bye!